Alright, we're working on changing out the master cylinder in the 1984 Mustang GT350. We did a complete brake overhaul. Not sure if you've seen that video, but we did a complete overhaul on the front brakes. But I still have a squishy pedal. At one point it almost went to the floor, so I believe this master cylinder is going to be our culprit. Alright, so in order to change this guy out, first things first, I already did this, but get as much fluid out of the master cylinder as you can. Pretty much got it empty. Next, make sure that you have some these special wrenches for these nuts. This one right here, you can see I got loose already. But that's 1/2 inch. Definitely make sure you got these flare nut wrenches. If not, chances are you're going to strip that. The back side is a little bit bigger. That's 5/8. Alright, so get both of these loose and just pull them out a little bit. Don't pull them out too much. You don't want to kink the lines. Again, make sure all your fluid's out. I just used a rag, a clean rag, even though it doesn't really matter. This is being replaced anyway. But just soaked out the brake fluid that was in there. If you got a little hand pump, that would work too, but a rag sucked it right up. So now we got 2 bolts we got to take off. Nuts rather. Got one there, and that one's gonna be a little tough to see, but there's one on the other side. These are 9/16. Alright, so once you get both of your nuts off the brake booster, make sure your lines are clear and out of the way. This should lift right out of here now. Alright, now that the master cylinder is off, I'm going to go ahead, take a brass wire brush and clean up some of this loose paint that's still hanging on. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe it down with some brake cleaner or something, and then maybe touch it up a little bit with black paint while I have it off. Definitely be careful with brake fluid when you're taking the master cylinder out, because brake fluid definitely doesn't agree with paint so much. If you get it on the car, get it off as quick as you can. I mean, it's not going to eat through it instantly, but definitely use something to catch your brake fluid. Alright, so I'm going to get the new master cylinder out. Going to get that into the vise, and we're going to bench bleed it before we put it in the car. This is a Wagner name brand master cylinder. It's a new old stock. Could be from the late 80s, early 90s, not quite sure. But if you watch my other brake video, I like to use original Ford stuff when I can find it, or stuff that was made in that era, if you can find that. And again, this was probably made in the 80s or 90s. You know, you do have to be concerned a little bit of its age. You know, there could be O-rings that are dried out and stuff, but I'm not overly concerned with that. I've bought in a lot of rubber type parts that were from the 80s, brake lines and things like that. Never had an issue. These usually sit in warehouses, you know, that's air conditioning, and it's not out in the sun and whatnot. So anyway, that's just one of my preferences. I like new old stock stuff. Not to sound cliche, but they don't make stuff like they used to. You can go and pick up one of these at your local, auto parts store, probably for 29 bucks or something if you got the cheapest one they had. But it's stamped out in China, and who knows how long it's going to last. Anyway, I'm going to get that set up into the vise, and we'll do some bench bleeding. Alright, first things first, make sure you got the right brake fluid. We're using DOT3. Fill up the front and the back reservoirs. Now this master cylinder just comes with a couple plastic plugs. Your newer ones will probably come with like threaded plugs. These just kind of press in there, so they're really just to kind of keep stuff from getting in there. But I'm going to remove these, and I'm going to let it gravity bleed a little bit. We should actually get a little bit of weeping out of these. Not a lot. It gets a little messy, so I'm going to put some rags here. But that's just the first step, and then after that, I'm going to show you we're going to go ahead and use this plunger to get the rest of the air out of that master cylinder. Alright, so to go ahead and bench bleed this master cylinder, I'm going to use one of these kits. You can pick these up at your local parts store usually. Comes with a bunch of different fittings, some hose. I like the hose kits. It's got usually the clear hose, so you can actually see the fluid go through it, and you can see the bubbles. Don't like that that's black, but it'll still work. So basically, you're going to take your plugs back out, you're going to find the fittings that fit, and you're going to take a piece of tube from each one of these, and you're going to put it into the fluid, make sure it's submerged in it. Same thing, put it in the fluid and make sure it's submerged, and then we're going to work that piston. Alright, so that's pretty much going to be your setup. Again, make sure you got the right fitting for each side. Thread that in, make it pretty tight. You don't want any leaks or where it can suck air back in. Make sure your hoses are on nice and tight. Just do a little loop-de-loop. They give you these plastic clips that clip onto the master cylinder, and then just put your hose where it's just off the bottom of the reservoir on each side. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this piston, and we're just going to keep pushing it in and let it out, in, let it out. You'll see some bubbles here. After a while, the bubbles should stop. You're still going to see fluid moving because you're pushing fluid around, but you're looking for the bubbles to go away, and you should start to feel that piston get harder as you go. Alright, so I'm not seeing any more bubbles. I'm just seeing the fluid kind of go around, and that's definitely a lot harder to push, so give it a couple more for good measure. Alright, so this is the Harbor Freight brake bleeder that we're going to use. You have to have an air compressor, and you're going to hook up your hose to the end of this handle. You depress the handle. It's got a little locking mechanism right there, and that'll lock it in place. And basically what this thing's doing, it's creating a vacuum. And this guy right here, that's going to go over your bleeder screw. It's not going to fit super tight, but it'll stay on there. And when you depress that trigger, it's going to get a little loud when I do this, so I want to explain it ahead of time. You'll watch brake fluid come through this hose. You're going to see some air in there. You don't necessarily have to wait until you don't see bubbles in there anymore, because the fact that this isn't a tight fit, you're kind of always sucking some air in, but you're sucking away from the brake line, so you're not putting air back into the system when you see that. But when you click this on, I usually take my thumb and just kind of keep some pressure on it, gives it a better seal. So I'm going to go ahead and get that set up, and we'll give it a shot. Alright, so hopefully you can see that. You can see I got my wrench slid on there first. I'm using a 1/4 inch wrench for the rear. The front's bigger. And then you go ahead and put your bleeder hose attachment on the other end. And that way you can loosen it up with the wrench, and then you can shut it with the wrench before you pull off the boot on the end. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started, and you should be able to see the brake fluid start to come through that hose. Alright, so the sequence for this is you're going to loosen up your bleeder screw before you do anything with the air. Once your bleeder screw is loose, you can go ahead, depress this handle, and then lock it with the locking clip. You'll see the stuff going through the hose. Let it go for a little while. You want to be careful how long you do it, because you want to make sure your reservoir stays filled up. And before you shut the air off, make sure you close your bleeder screw first, then shut your air off. If you don't do that and you shut the air off, it's going to suck all the air right back in. Alright, so we just loosened up that brake bleeder screw. We're going to go ahead and pull our handle and lock that. Alright, we're going to go ahead and lock that screw back down. Alright, now that that's locked down, now you can release. And at this point, you're going to want to keep checking your reservoir. And you're going to want to do that a few times at each one. You can see it went down, I don't know, maybe half an inch or so. So we're going to top that back off, and we're going to do that rear wheel probably a couple more times. Alright, next we're going to go to the next furthest wheel, which in this case is obviously going to be the driver's side rear. So, same setup here. I'm going to repeat it again because it's these steps are important. If not, you're going to suck air back into the system, and you're going to be in worse shape than when you started. So, get your wrench on your bleeder screw in the back. Put your nozzle on. Alright, once you got that on there, you're going to want to make sure you loosen up your bleeder screw first, and then you can activate the air. And then make sure you tighten your screw before you deactivate the air. If not, you'll suck air in between. So, I'm all set up here. I'm on there. My bleeder screw is loose. So we're going to go ahead, pull the trigger again, and lock it in place. Should be able to see that fluid moving in there, shaking the hose a little bit. And again, if you want, take your finger and just push in on that a little bit. And again, don't go too long because you don't want to dry out your reservoir. If you do, same thing, you're going to suck air in there and you're going to be starting over. So that's still running. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. Now the bleeder screw is tight. Now you can release the air. Alright, now we're on to the passenger front. Again, the next furthest away from the master cylinder. Same setup here. The brake bleeder is a little bit bigger than the rear one. That takes a 3/8 wrench. Same thing, put your wrench on and then put your nozzle on afterwards. We're going to do the same exact thing we did to the rear. We're going to open it up, pull the air on, let it suck for a while. Then we're going to close it, release the air, and we're going to do that 2 or 3 times. In between, we're going to be checking in, topping off the reservoir. Alright, we're on to our final side, driver side front. Same setup. We're going to go ahead and loosen this bleeder screw. Now we're going to go ahead and pull the air in. Alright, tighten it up before you let go of the air. Nice and tight. Now you can release. Check our reservoir. I'm going to top that off. And probably one more time is going to do it, and that should pretty much be it. Alright, so all 4 are bled. We're going to do our final top off. Try not to overfill it because you still got to put your top on. Alright, that's it. You should be bled. Obviously now you got to start it up and test the pedal, see how it feels. If it still feels squishy, you're going to want to go ahead and start in the rear again and work your way around. But usually if you don't, miscalculate and you don't let any air get sucked back in, going once all the way around should pretty much do the trick.